We have here what I would call 5 phases or 5 transitional points where we move from being the unsuspecting victim of trauma bonding and all the way to the point where we understand we are in this terrible situation. Now we need to break free. Now we need to get out of it. But before we delve into those 5 things, we first of all need to understand what a trauma bond actually is. And the way that I describe this is it's a point in time when you have a relationship with another person which you think is support, and then it becomes very obvious that what you thought was support really is a means of control. So now you are being controlled by this other person. You are emotionally bound to this person and you can't break free, which in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing if it's a positive experience. But what if it's not? What if it is an abusive experience? Well, that's where trauma bonding becomes a problem, and we need to figure out a way to get out of this situation. So, first thing rather that we need to understand is that positives begin as the controlling factor, and everyone understands this. We know it as the love bombing phase, as the grooming phase, and it's okay to love bomb somebody. I think early in most relationships, love bombing is just kind of normal, just kind of natural, because you want to put on a good first impression, because they say the first impression is a lasting impression. So let's say that you are a salesman and you're going to talk to a potential customer who has never met you before, and you want to put on a good first impression because you know that's going to be lasting and you want to develop a relationship with this person. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Say that you are romantically interested in somebody else, and so you want to make the initial approach, and the initial approach has to be, well, not abusive, right? But the initial approach, unless you're a caveman, but the initial approach has to be very positive. And that's a good thing as long as it's sincere and the positive remains throughout your relationship, and hopefully it does, but sometimes it's just a put on. Maybe it's a friendship. So somebody you meet at school or in the neighborhood or maybe at work or wherever you socialize with people, wherever you encounter people. So you're putting on that positive, friendly, whoever you are, I'm a nice guy. That is a positive first impression because you want that to be the lasting impression. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But some people do this. Some people put on that positive first impression for the express purpose of enticing people so they can later abuse them. Now, I've mentioned this in other videos, but the way that these psychopaths and narcissists approach attacking people, bonding themselves to people and people to them, is so similar to the way cults work. Because, you've never been, you'll never have a cult try to recruit you being abusive at the very beginning. They don't tell you all the dirty stuff that goes on behind the scene at the very onset. Same thing is true of a psychopath and narcissist. They don't tell you what you're in for. They want to convince you that you're in for something good when you're in for something bad. Remember that, if you're actually old enough, remember that song by Hermits, Peter Noon, I'm into something good. He was singing about his first interactions with a young woman, and he was in for something good. Well, hope it worked out well. I think it did because he made a lot of money off that record, I guess. But, yeah, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Unless the person who is grooming you, who is trying to allure you into his trap, is a bad guy. And that happens all the time. So, number one is the positives are the controlling factors. So this person is trying to manipulate you, trying to control you by being friendly, by being loving, by being considerate. And again, that's not a bad thing because all of us should do that. Not that we should try to control people, but we should have a relationship that is mutual and that we care about each other, that we have each other's back, that we are very supportive. And again, the narcissist, the psychopath, they do this for the wrong reason. Number two is the negatives are initially very minimal. Now, if you remember when we talked about this before, I love to use the analogy of the brownie that has one little walnut in it, and you bite into the brownie and you think you're going to have this tasty, chocolatey, moist brownie, and man, it's like was there a bone in this thing? What is that? Somebody put a walnut in this. Okay, some people like that, but initially the narcissist, the psychopath, you'll notice there's a little bit of abuse, and I guess again that's normal because no one's perfect. And when you start a relationship with someone, whether it's a friendship or a loving relationship, a love relationship, yeah, they're humans. They have problems, they have difficulties, they have challenges. So what happens? What happens is when we start forming that bond and we encounter those negatives, we understand this is normal. This is natural because we have our problems too, right? And so we learn to overlook those things, but that is the stage where the bonding begins. And I can't overemphasize that sometimes emotional bonding can be a very positive, good thing if the other person is not abusive. Well, what are these bonds? Well, it could be financial bonds. Say, for example, that you have a good friend and you guys work out a deal. Maybe, I don't know, just think of something. Maybe your good friend is going to sell you some property. So you work up a contract just between you and your friend, and now you have a financial bond. You owe him money, or maybe it's the other way around. He owes you money, but more likely it's in a love relationship. Say you get married, and your finances are now obviously intermingled. And just walking away from a marriage could have financial consequences. So that is a bond. A lot of times the bonding is social. If you walk away from this person, there will be social consequences because there are people, probably a lot of people, who are going to be convinced by this other, your significant other, that you're the bad guy because he or she has convinced them that you're the bad guy. So it could be social, it could be just emotional, it could be that you're really attached to this person, that you have invested your love. If it's just a friendship, you have invested your friendship, your trust in this individual. If it's a working relationship, you have invested your time and your life, much of your life, with this company, this organization that you're working for. And so now you see you're starting to have these bonds that are forming, and some of them are very strong. Another bond that I think of is just the bond of uncertainty. If you break away from this person who you sense is now starting to be a little bit too abusive, more than you should expect, well, what happens if I break away? Oh, where am I going to go? Who's going to understand me? What am I going to do for income? How is my life going to be? How is this going to hurt? Now, again, with a marriage, another bond is children. That, you got minors at home. What are you going to do? Wait till they're 18, grown, and out of the house? Sometimes that's an option, but it's not necessarily the best option. At least it doesn't do anything to alleviate the abuse. And then there are other bonds. Maybe I'm thinking of what I like to call, what a lot of psychologists call dirty laundry. That is to say that this person that you are in a bond with, a trauma bond with, knows everything about you, including the bad stuff. Now, if you say, I don't have any bad stuff, you're probably in denial. I mean, everyone has something in their life that they wish nobody knew about, and sometimes it's not that you're a bad, evil person, but you've made some really, honest mistakes, but mistakes nonetheless. That is why in some cults, remember we talked about the similarities between trauma bonding and getting involved with a psychopath, narcissist, and cults. Well, some cults, one of the first things they do is they will sit down and interview you because they're going to help you get all the bad stuff, out of your life. What they really want is they want you to unveil all the dirty little secrets, all the skeletons in your closet, all the dirty laundry in your life. Then later they can use that against you if you try to break free. So dirty laundry is, those secrets in your life that you hope nobody finds out about. yeah, that can be a real bond. And sometimes the person, the psychopath, the narcissist, will let you know. If you try to break free from me, I'm going to let everyone know about you. Now, if the psychopath, the narcissist, is unusually charismatic, and typically they are, somebody that other people trust and love, just like you did, and they're going to tell all these bad things about you if they're very social, even though they're not true, or even though the psychopath and narcissist may have even more dirty laundry than you do. Tons of it. They're not going to believe you, but they will believe the narcissist. They will believe the psychopath. So we have all of these bonds, and those are just the ones that come to mind. You could probably think of many others, but those are just some of the bonds that bind us to this abusive person, this narcissist, this psychopath. All right, those are 2 phases. What is phase number 3? It's that the negativity, the negatives, the abuse increases. So how do we respond to that? How do we react to that? Well, we could say, hey, this is getting to be just too much. I need to figure out how to get out of here. But more likely what we do is we just sink into denial. We make excuses, So now we have this cognitive dissonance where, on the one hand, we want to believe this is a good person, the person we first met. But on the other hand, contrary to that, we realize this is an abusive person, so we have this conflict going on. And to resolve the conflict, we deny the bad part. We try to minimize it in our mind. And the one thing that I hear over and over and over again when it comes to a narcissist, a psychopath, is people will say, well, he just doesn't have a filter, or she just doesn't have a filter. And we use that excuse, well, they just don't have a filter, We use that as an excuse to excuse their abuse. And sometimes their abuse is, it's hurtful, it's very painful. And we try to pretend that, well, yeah, I see that it's there, but it's not that big of a deal. I can handle it. So phase number 3 is that the negatives, they just now they're obvious. Going back to our analogy of the brownie and the walnut, now it's more walnut than it is brownie, We don't even know how the walnuts manage to stick together. Let's take this to the next step, number 4, is the negatives dominate as the controlling factor. So remember, at the very beginning of your relationship, when you were just forming these bonds, the ones we talked about, financial, social, emotional, having children, dirty laundry and all that, those were just forming. Well, now they're formed. And now you are bound. And now there seems to be no, the volume is up full blast and there's no way to turn it down. The abuse is up full blast and there's no way to turn it down. Sometimes the abuser may go back to that initial stage briefly and show you that, yeah, he can be a kind person if you do what he or she wants you to do. So they are now not using the positive as the binding effect, as the controlling factor, but the controlling factor now is the abuse. So what you want to do is avoid the abuse. That is what is controlling you. Where at the very beginning, you didn't even expect abuse. That had nothing to do with it. So what do we do? Well, due to all those consequences, that we mentioned about all the bonds, that we can't just break free. We can't just walk away from this. So we're bound, right? We're stuck. And the partner that you're involved with, he is cheerfully stuck. He's got you in a headlock, and he likes it, emotionally speaking, because it makes him feel strong. It boosts his ego, gives him supply, or her supply. And that's what it's all about. That's what supply is, as you already know. It's about inflating the narcissist, the psychopath's ego. That's what it's all about. All right, now, how do you break free of this? Well, I can't give you advice because I don't give advice on anything, but I can share with you ideas. I can tell you what I would do. I can tell you what you might want to consider doing. And my thought is you almost certainly have to get other people involved. And that's not easy because in many circumstances, not most, but many circumstances, maybe most, the psychopath, the narcissist, has cut you off socially. And they do that by design because they know you're going to get to this point where you're going to need help and they don't want you to get help. But sometimes you got to find a way to get outside of that fortress, well, not a fortress, let's call it a prison, that he is or she has built around you, and you got to make contact with people. Who are you going to contact? You could contact authorities, but typically that may not be the first place you go unless there is very obvious physical abuse, and then you get them involved. But you may want to go to the legal community. Well, that costs money, and the person you're bound to controls the finances. And there's no way, even if they don't, there's no way they're going to not know what you're doing. And some of these people are so savvy, they actually go to the authorities first. They will go get a lawyer first. They already got all that lined up because they just assume this is what you're going to do. So they're making presumptions. And they're prepared, but still you got to do it. And if you're broke, you really don't have income, then chances are there are probably some nonprofits out there that can help you. But the problem with that is there are some people who have really good household income, but they're still broke because they spend more than they bring in. And some of those resources that are nonprofit are not available to you. Well, another place to go is other nonprofits for legal help, for therapy. And often that comes in the form of a religious community, typically a church, maybe a synagogue or whatever. And sometimes you can go there with anonymity and find resources to help you. And it doesn't cost you anything, and it can be very challenging to figure out who to go to, but that is an option that's available. But the answer to the question that we begin with is, how do you break a trauma bond? The short answer is you got to get other people involved who are on your side somehow, some way. And again, that's just my idea. That's just my thought based upon my life experience, which has been pushing 7 decades. Got to get other people involved. Now, if you are a person who is not socially inclined, I understand that can be very challenging, particularly if you are somebody with Asperger's syndrome and you just don't do well talking to the people. And your partner is charismatic and they're very, very convincing. Yeah, it can be a challenge, but sometimes you got to take the leap. You got to do what you got to do. There are 2 rectangles on the screen, so if you want to keep our conversation going, all you got to do is click one of those 2 rectangles and we'll keep on chatting together. But if not, we want to thank you for stopping by, and we will see you all next time.